Hello, and welcome back to a new episode of TOXstream, the live streaming show brought to you by Alto Talks Academy. My name is Matteo. I'm the host of this space. Let me just remove the background on a second. Yes, I'm the host of this space, and I'm very happy to be here. I hope you're having a wonderful evening so far. If you're not that familiar with us, with what is happening in this specific space or with Alter Talks, we are a Belgian company. We are based in Brussels, and what we do is promoting as much as possible alternative methods to animal testing. And we do this through dissemination, communication, education, any sort of activities that you can think of, you name it, and we are probably doing it. If this is something that is also interesting for you, maybe because you are involved in that or you just like the idea of it, I would suggest you to have a look at our website, altertalks.academy.be. There you can find all the information about our activities, all our product, and also the contact if you want to reach out. We are always happy to meet new people that are also interested in the same thing that we are interested in. While for this space, for TOXstream, well, this is our live streaming show, as I was saying, and is the place where we invite experts and we ask them to help us understand a little bit better this very complicated world of toxicology, alternative method animal testing, and science in general. And we give you the opportunity to interact with these experts as well, because even if you are just online, you can use our chat, either if you are on LinkedIn or YouTube, on Twitch. Right now we're streaming in all the different directions. You can just use the chat. You can just write your comment, you can write your question, you can write your suggestion or whatever you want to write. And I'm going to do my best to react to it or to bring your question to the expert if this is the case. So do not hesitate to use it throughout the entire show. And this is the second episode of the second season. So we already have a few episodes on our belt. And if you miss some of them, well, I would suggest you to go and check our website. You can find everything there, but also on our YouTube channel, where you can find all the different episodes that we put together. There are many different topics. I'm sure you're going to find something that you are going to like. If you, on the other hand, you already have been here, you already know who we are and what we're doing here, well, welcome. Sorry for the long introduction. And I hope you're going to have a good time tonight as well. So with that out of the way, we can jump in the topic that we prepared for you tonight, which is a quite interesting one. We call it Science and Policy. That's the title of the topic today. And it's kind of an interesting one because I feel it's almost like two topics in one, or a tale of two different sides. Because as you can see, we have science and policy that comes interacting together. And in a nutshell, it's very easy to understand. It's basically the idea that we can use scientific evidences, scientific facts, to come up with better policies, with better regulations. And that's kind of about it. And it makes sense. I mean, if we base our regulation on something that we kind of trust on, like science, probably we're going to do a better job than doing the opposite. However, this is not so simple. There are a lot of other more complicated aspects in this topic, and today we're going to try to understand it a little bit better. When it comes to toxicology, it's relatively easy to understand why policies is intertwined together with science. I mean, at the end of the day, toxicology is just a way that we have to understand which chemicals are good for us, which chemicals are bad for us, and how can we protect ourselves from the bad one. And we have to know this before. So the scientific part of this equation is what really gives us the information that we can then use to create better policies to protect ourselves, the environment, and the society in general. And it's kind of difficult to argue against this sort of process. But of course, there are a few issues, a few problems, and this is not always straightforward, and we cannot always do it in this way. First of all, this is not how we work. This is not how our brain used to work when we take a decision. I mean, let's imagine that you want to decide what to have for dinner, which pizza to have for dinner. You know, you're not going to take out the last scientific review who tries to tell you which one is the best pizza for you or the worst pizza for you, especially because everybody knows that the best pizza is porta formaggi, so there is no debate there. But anyway, you are not going to do this if you have to decide what to eat for dinner. And in general, many of the decisions that you're going to take during your day are not based on scientific evidences, because there are also other factors. There are emotional factors. There are also the pressure from the society that can guide us in one direction or another. So we have to kind of train our brain to focus also only on or specifically on scientific evidences. And then there are also other issues. First of all, as I said, this is a tale of science and policy, which means it is a tale of scientists and policymakers, which are fundamentally two different type of people, two different groups, that they think in different ways, they interact in different ways, and they communicate in different ways. Scientists, for example, are very focused on accuracy. They really want to be sure that what they're saying is true, and as long as what they're saying is true or they believe it's true, they're fine, they did their job. On the other hand, policymakers, they have to apply this sort of knowledge to a much more complicated environment than a laboratory. They have to apply it to their real life. They have to apply it to people, to a society. And sometimes what works in a laboratory might not work in the society. And this is reflected also in the way in which they communicate. Scientists might think that a scientific article would be the best way to communicate their results to all their colleagues. But maybe policymakers might think that this is not exactly the best. Maybe there are information that are missing, or maybe there are too many informations. And so they need to find a way. It is necessary to find a way for these people to connect. And it's not so easy to do it if you're not trained. And finally, another important point is that sometimes there isn't just one answer or one right answer, maybe. And we saw this during the pandemic, when we had the worst of the COVID pandemic, when everybody was trying to decide if going to lockdown or not, and for how long. We had these two scenarios. On one side, we had epidemiologists who were saying, yeah, we have to close because we have to do as much as possible to avoid the spreading of the virus, which, yes, of course, it was true. And they knew what they were saying, and they were right, and they had their model, and what they were saying made sense to them. But at the same time, we had economists who were saying, yeah, of course, you can do that. You have to close to avoid the spreading of the virus. But if you close too much, economy will go down. And if the economy collapses, well, we might have all other kind of problems that might even be worse than the pandemic in the first place. And even the economists were right. Or maybe they were both wrong. I don't know. But the point is that policymakers, sometimes they might also be in a situation where they have to weigh different sort of evidence, which might be both right in their own way. And so for all these reasons, and many others that we are going to try to dissect today, we will give a better look, a closer look to the world of science and policy, and try to understand if we can make this a little bit more understandable for everybody. And of course, I'm not going to be the one telling most of this, because I'm no expert in this world, but we have a great guest that is going to be able to give us all the ins and outs of this world. So I think it's time for you to meet our expert. Hello, Lene.
Hello, Matteo.
How are you? All good?
All good. I've already had dinner, so
Perfect.
I'm in a good mood.
You beat me already on that. I'm running behind as usual, and now I was thinking about pizza, so I got even hungry. But it's fine. I'll give you 2 words of introduction, and then you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, or if you want to add something. So Lene Topp, so we asked you to be here because indeed you are an expert in science for policy. You work as analyst science for policy at the European Commission, at the JRC already from, I think, nearly 6 years. So it's been a while, so you probably know a lot. And you've been focusing on the competencies that are necessary to do this job as best as possible, and how to translate them in training and more practical way to really empower people that are working in this field and make a better job. Or at least that was my view. Is this something you want to add?
This resonates very well with me. So well done.
Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for accepting this invitation and for spending your evening with us. Once again, to everybody listening, if you have some question for me or for Lene, or a comment or a suggestion, feel free to use the chat. We are here for that as well. So to jump into that, before going straight into what science for policy is and everything else, I always like to ask my guests, how the hell did they ended up doing this? If this was a conscious choice, or you ended up here, kind of by chance. So how did you end up working on science for policy?
Well, it's a kind of a combination of what I did before. I arrived in Brussels in year 2000, actually, as many people arrived here for a 6 months internship, and then I never left the city again. So I think it's a kind of a typical Brussels career. So, and I was working on trainings, and I was working on impact assessments, evaluations, and so on. And then at some point, 15 years in Brussels, not having worked for the EU institutions, as well, okay, maybe, to follow in everybody else's footstep, this is a good move. And then I really saw kind of my dream job, because it was a combination of what I had done before. It was training, which I love to do. And then it was also on evidence, on science, and how to bring that better into policy making. So that was that was my kind of sign. It was a sign for me: apply here and do your best to get it.
Okay, yeah, I feel makes sense. I mean, if you stay in Brussels too long, people they're gonna start to ask you, why do you stay there? Yeah, you're gonna work for the Commission then, and you feel you have to, I guess. But no, I understand. And maybe to follow up on that, since you had so long time to work on that, why do you think it's important to do this sort of job? Maybe not specifically what you are doing in the training, but more in a general sense, the science for policy ideas. Why is this something that we really have to spend energy on, and we should spend even more energy from your point of view?
I mean, it's just there's so much good research out there that is just not being picked up in policy making. So there's so much research out there that is relevant and so on, but nobody knows that it exists, because it's not being communicated in a way that it's understandable for non-scientists, or it's behind a paywall, or so there's just so much. I once read, just so the JRC is 3,000 people, 2,000 researchers more or less, and I think I read something like 10,000 pages coming out of the JRC every month. So this is just one institution. So imagine all the research institutions that are out there. Imagine all that comes out there, and this very little percentage of it actually being known to the public or known to policymakers. So this was really whether, okay, here there's a job where you should try and improve that situation. So yeah, this was my call.
No, but that's a great goal. I mean, it happened to me. I'm not gonna name names, but it happened to me to speak with people working in the GRC indeed and saying, "Oh, we did this amazing research, yeah, but we never published it." Oh, why? I mean, you have such a huge body of knowledge that indeed it will be worth to be disseminated as much as possible, because indeed it's terrific work. Okay, no, I understand. And to move then a little bit closer to the topic itself, so you focus a lot on competencies, which is, I think, is a wonderful way to approach it, because it's not about the method itself, but really how to do the job. And I'd like to have your point of view, first of all, on when it comes to competencies, the people that approach the world of science and policy. First of all, do they have the competence that are necessary, and maybe which one they don't have, and how they approach the fact that they are lacking? Do they understand that they are lacking competencies? Stuff like that.
I think what we often hear is that, as a scientist, I'm doing great job. I've done this wonderful report and so on. And I really don't understand why the policymakers didn't read it, or why they didn't use it in their new legislation. And there's this frustration, that, I mean, I did everything I could, why wasn't it used? And what we realized at the JSC was, because we're in the same situation, despite us being inside the commission, we also have difficulties getting, our messages across. So we realized that it actually requires a certain kind of an additional complementary competences as a scientist to work at this interface between science and policy. And these competences are not something that you're taught at university. It's something about, you need to understand a little bit the basics of how policy making work, so that you can figure out when in the policy process do you need to intervene. In the beginning of the process, when you're brainstorming, there's lots of room for discussions and new proposals. But when you're at the third reading in the parliament, we're changing commas. We're not changing. Yeah. So you need to understand a little bit the policy making. You need to be able to communicate in a different way, as you alluded to in the introduction. You need to be able to collaborate with others outside your own discipline. And you need to engage with policymakers, citizens, and stakeholders. So lots of competences. We've done a mapping of it, and we always stress, because there's 27 competences in this mapping. We always stress,
just,
and I will
just the major competencies, not even like specific
and we
ones.
always say this is the collective set. So this is something that a university department can cover collectively.
Okay.
And then you yourself choose a few that you want to be good at.
Okay.
But this is a collective, so we're not advocating for any superhumans to be developed, and we're not advocating for scientists to work more. We're advocating for scientists at the interface to work a little bit differently.
No, I understand. And so this is mostly from the side of the scientists, but you also cover a little bit, of course, from the other side. And what is the policymakers' point of view? When they approach the scientists, do they expect to have in front of them someone that is able to condense everything in a single sentence, or they kind of get that there is some difficulties on the other side?
I think for the policymakers, we've also developed a competence framework for policymakers, and one of the competences is called working with evidence. So basically, it's about knowing, okay, what kind of evidence or science would be relevant for this policy problem that I have here. Because what often goes wrong in the collaboration is that the questions that are being asked are either not the right ones or not understood by the scientists. So from the outset, there's a kind of a misunderstanding in many cases. And what we always say to our scientists is that don't hesitate to question the question.
Okay.
Because the policymakers probably don't know as much about this area as you do as a scientist. So how can we expect them to ask the right questions? So of course, do it in a polite way, but it makes good sense to question the question rather than answering a question that you think is completely, irrelevant for the policy problem, just to be polite, so to say.
Yeah, no, I understand, of course. Yeah, it's a very complex word, and you cannot you have to dig in a little bit. You have to make the extra effort and not just saying, okay, well, I did my thing. I send them the report. That's it. I see. And maybe because, okay, you talk about this work that you did with the competencies. We're going to link it in the chat at some point, because it's a wonderful, also from the visual point of view. I had to have a look at it on the Commission website. It's also nice the way in which you can see all the different competencies. It gives you an idea of how complicated is this work. But how this work was taken when you get it out? You already had a lot of because you published earlier this year. That was, I want to say, June, but maybe it was before even.
Yeah.
Earlier this year anyway.
Yeah. So it was a research project for us. Which started 4.5-5 years ago, where we did first kind of a review of the existing evidence on competences, to kind of do a first mapping. And we quickly realized that there was actually not much talking about competences for neither policymaker or researchers. And in the beginning, we also thought that we were going to do one competence framework for both to kind of bridge the two, the policymakers and the researchers. But then we quickly realized that since they come from different starting points, through the education, through the experiences, we had to split it into two. But half of the competences are actually the same.
Okay.
Because in terms of collaboration, it's the same. Facilitation is the same. In terms of clear writing, speaking with impact in the communication cluster, is the same. So there are many overlaps, but there are also some competences, for example, scientists have to communicate on uncertainty. That's not a competence for policymakers they would normally get involved in. So we did this, we did the literature review, and then we had the mapping validated in a workshop with 40 international experts, refined the mapping, and then we basically spent 2 years looking into these competencies and fleshing them out on 4 different levels of proficiency.
Okay.
And then got it validated by learning and development experts. And maybe also here, just to mention, to make it a little bit more complex. So competence is defined by skills, knowledge, and attitudes.
Okay.
So a competence is something that you do, it's something that you know, and it's an attitude. So it's your mindset. Because you can say that as a scientist, if you might be good at communicating in clear language and speaking with impact, but if you don't have the mindset or the attitude to say that I am going to spend some of my working time on communicating with the public or on communicating with policymakers, then it doesn't have any impact that you have these skills or these knowledge that at being good at speaking or being good at writing. So it's also really, it's important to have this attitude mindset aspect in there, because without that we don't really change much. So it's good to remember that competences is knowledge, skills, and attitudes in order for it really to work.
Okay, I didn't realize it was such a comprehensive work. But no, I like this approach. Indeed, we're not just talking about skills, not just talking about you know the know-how. You really have other aspects around, because indeed it's a very peculiar activity, I would say. And you mentioned the word complexity a few times, or maybe I mentioned the word complexity a few times. And there is this aspect that I'm always interested when it comes to toxicology, because I feel it's really unique to the toxicology world. And it's super fascinating for me. And it's very related to policies at the end. And it's the fact that there is this duality in toxicology where on one side, you need to have a real scientific evidence for something before you can use it. But this scientific evidence, as you said, needs to be understood. Because policymakers will not just take something because a scientist say, it's perfect, use it. They need to understand it to a certain extent. And I'm always wondering, coming from a scientific side, are we not risking to lose some of these scientific discoveries because they are so complex, which might not be so easily understandable by a non-scientist? I'm thinking, for example, anything that's related to machine learning, it's something that by definition we cannot understand 100%. Or maybe the more complicated techniques on genomics and transcriptomics that are also extremely complex. And policymakers maybe might not be equipped to understand them and scientists to explain them. How do we reconcile this kind of paradox that we have in toxicology? If there is for you. For me, there is, but I want to hear your opinion, of course.
There is a paradox, but you could also turn it the other way around, saying, that if we make it too complex, we risk not communicating anything. Right? There's also the risk that then nothing gets across. So let's say you have a spectrum of 100%. So if you make it too simple, everything will go through, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you make it too complex, nothing will go through. So you have to find a balance between the two.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I think the risk is also real that nothing gets through because it's too complex.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, from my side, of course, it's easier to side with the scientists because I was a scientist, I guess. But on my side, I'm thinking already when I had to write reading a paper and I couldn't understand it because it was too complex. I was like, what's the point of it at the end? If it's too complex, then yeah, it sounds cool, but maybe people won't get it. Okay, no, I think you painted already a nice picture for me. And I hope for the audience as well. And again, if you have any comment, just put it in the chat. We are here for you as well. But before jumping on the next section, I'd like to show you a more concrete example of what exactly means to work on toxicology and science and policy. Because earlier this year, I was traveling a little bit for conferences. In this case, I went to ESOF, that was in Leiden. Again, I want to say July or June at some point, don't remember. The weather was better. And I had the chance to sit down with someone that is actually working in this interface between science and policy, and he was kind enough to give me a few of his hours to explain you what he does. And so I have a little clip to show you, so don't leave, and we come back in a few minutes, and then you tell me what you think.
It's 6:30 in the morning, and we are in Leiden. Let's go.
I have 3 reasons to be in Leiden today. The first one is to pilot an electric boat in one of its many water channels. The second one is to participate in the European Science Open Forum Conference, where researchers, policymakers and other professionals come together to interact and discuss in an interdisciplinary setting. And the third one is to meet Johannes Skimming, a German toxicologist who did his PhD in Leiden and now works at the Health Council of the Netherlands, helping to develop new science-based policies. And today he will try to explain me what this actually means.
But what I basically came here to was to fundamentally enjoy this combination of bioscience park, to have like industry and academia close intertwined with each other in different kind of scenarios. But for me it was important because there was this big EU project focused on bringing the EU and other members in a project together in order to allow the next generation of toxicology to kick off. In academia, you feel yourself a bit far away from from real life, from the actual human being. That wasn't really my path forward. So already during the time of my PhD and even like 1.5 years beforehand, what I did was I followed postgraduate education for toxicology. There I learned about a thing which is the Health Council of the Netherlands. In Dutch it's called Gezondheidsraad. This whole thing, this Health Council, is constituted of the council itself, the experts from the field, and on the other hand you have what they call the scientific secretariat, which consists of scientific staff and support staff, and I'm a scientific staff member. And what we do is we guide this whole process. We take the question from the ministry, translate that into answerable research questions, and together with the experts in the council, we then come up with a good report, and of course together with the Dutch Institute for Public Health and Environment. And this report goes out to the public in an open consultation round. So we get feedback. We directly get feedback from our partners of other comparable organizations, or in the public consultation round, of course, then from industry. Which is most of the case actually quite constructive, because we just try to get the science right. yeah, you're the bridge, you're the communicator, you're the translator for the politicians to the expert. So if someone asks you, okay, respirable and inhalable dust in the workplace, we need to make sure that it's safe, so do occupational safety levels. Yeah, but what do you mean when you say dust?
Exactly.
If we then figure out a way to do our toxicity testing better with that, less people get impaired, and if the regulation is not only applied in Germany or in the Netherlands, throughout all 27 member states, I think all the dock workers or metal workers in the Polish company are thankful for that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Johannes, for taking the time for meeting with me. I hope you're following us. If not, well, whenever you're going to see it, thank you for that. It really helped me to get a better grasp of what exactly this scientist needs to do in this setting. First of all, it's something that you applied already a little bit because you said it at the beginning. When he was discussing about the importance of getting the right question and getting the right answer. I mean, is this really the issues that happens often, or it's more not so important aspect? Just to understand a little bit better, if this is actually what happens, that you really have to ask, okay, but what do you mean by dust?
I think it's fundamental, because
Okay.
if we don't have a common understanding of what we mean by dust, then the researchers will look at something else than the policymakers had in mind. So it's really what we always say is that, even if you think that as a researcher that you've understood the question, do validate your understanding with the policymaker, because it's written in one way and it might be interpreted in another way. Communication is not that 100% goes through, right? There's all kinds of things that can go wrong without any bad intentions. So I would say never ever start, a research or collecting or looking for information or synthesizing information for policymakers before you have validated with them either by email or by in person or by phone. Okay, so what you mean by dust is da 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 da. And then you can go and then you can get started, and then you have avoided wasting time on something that was not necessary.
Yeah, I never thought that indeed that you had this sort of practical issues. I don't know. Every time I had in mind this work, I imagine people thinking and doing very complicated things. But yes, at the end of the day, you also need to agree on what you are discussing about. Otherwise, you risk, of course, losing your time. But it's very funny and interesting to learn about it, honestly. Another point that Johannes pointed out when he was explaining the process. So when the minister asked them to come up with a report on something, there is also this open consultation around. And he also mentioned that this happens also not just within the country, especially at the EU level. It can happen in the entire EU area. And I'm wondering, what's the situation there? It is easy to share and to communicate within the different 27 member states. I'm thinking also just the language. I mean, everybody's writing this in English, or I have a hard time thinking that in Italy we write everything in English, but maybe I'm going to be positively surprised.
No, of course there's the language issue. So I think that's language and cultural, right? So it's not so easy, I think, to get input in open consultations from across the EU, and also because some subjects are high on the agenda at a certain point in one country and low on the agenda in another country. So it's a big geographical area to cover, and geographical, linguistic, and cultural area. So, but this is not to say that we shouldn't do it. This is just to be realistic in the expectations, but we should by all means continue doing it, because everything we get is more than we would have, everything we get is a bonus, right? If we didn't do it, we wouldn't have gotten anything. So
Yeah. But in this field, indeed, it's because I'm thinking at the EU, I'm assuming there must be some sort of agreement on some regulation, some level of regulation. But these are more like directives, so the single member states that needs to apply as it is, or is more that is a field where each one can kind of do whatever they want.
you have two types. You have the one where you have to do what it says in the legislation, so everybody implements in the same way. And then the other option is, depending on the legal instrument, that you have to do it within these boundaries, or you can go above, you can do it in your way, in another way, but here are kind of the overall principles that you have to live up to. So
Okay.
that depends from one policy area, one legislation to the other.
Okay, but at least there is one level in which everybody needs to agree, so there must be some sort of harmonization, which is always nice. Okay, now there is always the moment in which I step up for a moment from the show, and I let my colleague Leonie to jump in. She's gonna bring another side of this project, of this topic. And I'm gonna leave you to speak with her for a few minutes. So I'm gonna launch the segment of Leonie just after a very, very short spot that we prepared at Alta Talks.
Alta Talks presents Data Box, the first game about new approach methodologies. You want to be part of the journey towards alternatives to animal research and tests? Change is one game away. Come and embody a scientist on their path to develop a new NAM. Tile by tile, step by step, play your way towards validating your method. Save animals while creating your path. And understand the needed steps for validation and dissemination. Play, learn, raise awareness, discuss, teach, support. May the fun be with NAMs.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in again to a super interesting topic. Science to policy is very near and dear to my heart, has been for a long time. I think it is endlessly fascinating, and I'm very interested to talk to tonight's expert about all of these aspects and to learn from her. And maybe just to start, I wanted to talk to you about one very great conference in the realm of science to policy that I visited earlier this year in April. It was the Science Under Pressure conference in Brussels that was organized by the European Commission. And topics that were discussed there, first of all, the panel was really amazing. There were lots of science advisors. There are also chief science advisors who spoke in the panels. And a lot of the discussion was around the situation during the pandemic and how scientific advice worked there. And there was a lot of pressure on scientists in that situation. And what I found very interesting is that a lot of people concluded that if you compare how it worked during the pandemic with COVID, and then compare it to the climate change crisis, that we had two very different situations. With the climate crisis, for a long time, we feel that most of the science is there and we understand the topic very well, and there's lots of policy options on the table, but policy doesn't seem to move. And it was the opposite during the pandemic, where the science wasn't fully there yet, and we could see in real time how science to policy actually worked. How did you reflect on that situation?
I think if one good thing came out of COVID, it was that suddenly everybody realized that how much we need science to do policy. Because we could see that if we had the science, we could take better evidence-informed decision, and hence improve the situation for the population, for the businesses, for society in general. So I think that was one good thing that came out of COVID.
Yes, certainly. I will drop the link to this conference in the chat in a second, because I think most of the panel discussions are still available via the website of the conference. And it's very interesting discussion that happened there over the course of 2 days, I think. And I agree, the importance or even existence of this interface between science and policy, I think, isn't something that a lot of people know about, and also how important science is in this process. And I think a lot of people appreciate science more in a different way now, as we are coming maybe towards an end of the pandemic, maybe sometime in the near future. And this was also reflected during the conference, that even like polls in certain countries showed that the how people view science has been gotten a lot better over the course of this pandemic. And do you think this is also something that we as scientists who do want to communicate to the world and then to policymakers, but also to the general public, so the general public better understands how policy is made? Do you think this is like this shift in society is something we can use in the future?
Yeah, I think it should encourage us to make the effort of communicating more with society in general and policymakers in as well. Because I can't remember the exact figure, but I think it's around 2/3 of European citizens say we want scientists to be more involved in policymaking, right? This is a call for action. This is a call, please do spend some time on communicating your science and making it understandable to the ones that take decisions on our behalf. So I would definitely say that this is something, that we should take as a call for action. Yeah, let's get involved.
Yes, and this goes out to all the scientists out there. There are many ways of scientists to communicate to the general public and also to policymakers. And I think we're going to talk a bit in a while also about some resources where you can see maybe if you can get involved. But first, I want to also maybe put some faces to science policy advisors. And Lene, this is a little quiz for people at home, but maybe you can also just let me know what you think. So there's this international network for governmental science advice, which is a global platform for science to policy. And this body has a president. And can you point out in the slides that you see which one of these gentlemen is the current president of INGSA? Do you know? Yes, you do? Okay, let me know.
Is Remy, the one with the glasses?
Yes, very, very good. Yes, this is actually Professor Remy Guiron. He's also the chief scientist of Quebec and the current president of INGSA. But I think he has some resemblance to Jason Bateman. So if there's ever going to be a Hollywood picture about the life of Remy, I think Jason could definitely play the part. Then if we look at this lovely group of people on the top and in the bottom, I don't know if you know them, Lene, but maybe you can also just give me your best guess. Which of these groups do you think are the current 7 chief scientific advisors to the European Commission?
The upper ones.
The upper ones, yes. When I put it together, I thought like the gentleman on the top left, he could be a scientist. He definitely knows some things. But of course, you're right. The group on the top is the current group of chief scientific advisors. And maybe some of the German viewers we have know that the bottom half of the slide shows the group that is the cast of Stromberg. And for those of you who don't know, Stromberg is the German version of The Office. And yes, it is exactly what you can imagine. It is, I don't know how to put this delicately, but it is, there could be some improvement to the German humor on this show. Maybe we shouldn't talk about it too much. I just want to thank the one person who gave me the idea for this little game. And this was a student in a seminar that I taught in university a couple of weeks back. And he presented about the great and famous conservationist Dian Fossey. And in his presentation, he actually showed a picture of Sigourney Weaver from the movie that was made about Dian Fossey. So thanks to that student for giving me the idea of this little quiz. And with this, yeah, Lene, maybe you, I think you mentioned when we talked before that there exists this paper that has been put together about resources such as INCSA and also the scientific advisory bodies in the European Union. Do you, can you just say like a little sentence about that document? So maybe some people want to check it out.
Yeah, so actually 2-3 weeks ago, the Commission published a document called a staff working document, which is a very easy to read mapping document of what exists out there in terms of connecting science and policy at member state level, but also at EU level. And it also, the document also sets out kind of the issues that we've talked about today. So what are the challenges that we are facing, and then what are then the examples of solutions that exist out there that we could maybe consider scaling up across member states or at EU level. So the good thing about the document is that it's not too long and it has lots of footnotes to further reading, so you can kind of pick and choose what you want to dig deeper into. So I would really highly recommend it, this staff working document.
Yes, thank you so much. So for everyone who is interested to check that out, the link is in the comments. Then at this point, I want to say thank you, Lene, for talking to me, and want to bring back Matteo to the stage.
Thank you, Leonie.
Yeah, to all of you out there, see you next time. Bye.
Thank you, Leonie. I tried to put as much as possible the resources in the chat, so people can also check it with their time also after the live. I'm really happy that the picture of the politicians with all this, the regulators with the one on above, because the one on below didn't really seems trustworthy, to be honest. But thank you, Leonie, for that. We are close to the closure, close to the end. I just have a few questions for you left. First of all, it's a continuation of what you discussed with Leonie. I'm thinking, if you're a scientist, I'm a scientist, and if I want to try to enter in this world, in the world of science for policy, maybe trying to become a science advisor, or I'm just want to make sure that what I do is picked up by politicians and policymakers a little bit more, what can I do? What are the steps that I should or I could take to go in that direction?
I think I'm just going to copy in actually a link. We have a very kind of short paper or short 4 pages on 10 tips for policy impact.
That's great.
Let me just put them in here, and then Matteo, maybe you can put them into the
Yes.
comments. Because what is really important is that, and you see it as one of the 10 tips, it's a team sport. So it's not something that you do yourself. Getting policy impact, no one single scientist have all the answers to how do we deal with COVID, or how do we deal with climate change, or how, So it's a team sport. We need to work across disciplines to come up with, as we saw in COVID, you need to have economists, you have to have all kinds of medical professionals, you have psychologists, you have all kinds of specialists, of scientists involved, that together then put forward a policy option, right? It's not you as a specific scientist that put forward one option, looking at it only from your, sorry to say, narrow view, but it's a team sport. So you need to work across disciplines and then bring forward a kind of a collective answer to the question.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, as you say, you're not looking for the superhero scientist is gonna solve everything by himself or herself. It's really a team effort, so you really have to wait in all of us together. I mean, it's indeed it's a great suggestion. And maybe my very last question would be, if you had to point out really the most important or the biggest difficulties that we have right now in science for policy, and maybe some way that we can overcome it, to finish on a positive note.
Oh, that's a difficult one.
You can also have the top 5 if you want.
I would say it's not. I wouldn't dare to say which one is the biggest, but this is me speaking from my heart. I mean, I think that as scientists, and I would say the same to policymakers, we need to show more empathy towards the other profession, because then we would also communicate in a better way. If we understood, if we if we were a policymaker for 2 weeks, we would better understand the pressure that they are under, and vice versa. If the policymaker was a scientist for 2 weeks, or whatever time it takes, then we would better understand what is needed. And I think this would develop empathy to kind of, okay, all right, now I understand. Now I can better understand why they asked these silly questions, or as a policymaker, I can better understand why they couldn't give me this within 1 week. And this is actually also, just to come back to the training that we do. When we do training, we start with a simulation game. So we start with a game where we actually developed it 5 years ago, but now it's become very topical because it's a country running out of energy. And then the training for scientists, you play different types of policymakers, some with the prime minister, some with the minister of energy, and some of the scientific advisors, political advisors. And we always hear after this 1 hour game, whoa, I didn't realize that there were so many different types of evidence. I didn't realize, that there were these other considerations of, political game, emotions playing in, elections coming, and what have you. So I think this developing more empathy between policymakers and researchers would be a very useful step.
Yeah, right. No, it's great. I love it that indeed it's not just a scientific skill. It's really a personal skill, a people skill that indeed we need to do this kind of job. By the way, I would love to see this kind of trainings. I mean, I think it would be the best next TV show. I mean, I would definitely love it to see scientists that try to be policymakers for a week. It would be awesome. But how can you be part of the training? If I want to be part of the training, how does it work?
So first of all, the training material is free for anybody to take. So it's on our website, which I can link to in a minute. And then actually, since you're not the only one who likes to try this out, 1.5 years ago, we started a training of trainers program, meaning that we have trained trainers. Now we're 64 trainers we've trained from across the EU that are now ready to deliver trainings in local language or in English or in whatever. So you can get in touch if you have a group of people that would like to have a training. Then I mean, yes, you would need to figure out how to finance it, but once you figured that out, then everything is ready to be implemented
To go. Okay, that's amazing. I really want to do this. I'll see. I don't know if I can convince my friends to do it or our company, but it would be the amazing team building activity. Great. No, thank you very much, Lene, for all your time and for staying with me and replying to all the questions. We had a few people that thanks us. Thank you as well from the audience for taking the time to stay with us. I feel that the picture is a little clearer for me, at least from when I started. And that's definitely thanks to you and to your time.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. I am still happy that I had dinner beforehand, I must say, but I enjoyed it. So, and I mean, don't forget that the European Commission is taxpayers' money, so we are here to help. So if there's anything we can do, any questions, please do get in touch, and we will try and do our best to put you in the right direction.
Yeah, no, well said, indeed. We don't communicate enough what the Commission is doing. There is a lot of work happening behind doors. Again, thank you very much, Lene. I hope we're gonna have the opportunity to speak again soon.
Likewise.
With anybody else, well, thank you very much for staying with us till the end. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. I definitely did. We will be back in a few weeks on the 30th of November. There is going to be the next episode of TOXstreams. This time we stay kind of in the world of the Commission, because we are going to talk about project that is financed by the European Commission, which is called OnTox, that is developing new approach methodologies to replace animal testing in toxicology. That's, I said it already a few times. And we're going to have the coordinators and a few scientists that will be able to discuss with us exactly what it means, how do they spend taxpayer money, as Lene was saying, and all the cool science that they are doing behind us. Having said that, I'm just going to have a quick look if there are some messages that I want to share. Indeed, Chiara, she's pointing out that there is this online platform that is done by the GRC, which is really it's wonderful. It's one of the things that we put out in the chat. You can get a check for it. You have all the different competencies and also way in which you can learn this competence, which is really an amazing work. So I really encourage you all to check it out because it's a really cool job. So thank you, Chiara, for pointing it out. And with everybody else, well, I hope to see you again in a few weeks, and see you next time. Bye-bye.